All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Make sure I haven't missed anybody. Hunter, Michael, Keontae. I think everybody else is here, or I've already spoken to them. So what we're going to do today, I want to go over chapter 6. There's Keontae there. We're going to go over chapter 6 and probably not the whole chapter because I have a video I want to show you guys. And I'll tell you this, I had super good intentions with y'all's little case study activity that you turned in to me. I took everything home with me for the week except for these. They were in my office, and I just didn't get a chance yesterday. I kept having people coming in my office and things like that. Long story short, I didn't get them graded yet. Don't hold that against me. I will get them soon, and I'm sure you all did well. From what I just kind of glancing through them, it looked like everybody did, what I was looking for on them, and there's a little leeway on what we're looking for. Anyway, so if you gave me something that makes sense to me, you'll get credit. That's how I'd like to grade. I don't nitpick too hard on too many things. So that's that for the case study. So we'll get into this chapter 6, which is, I believe, we finished up chapter 5 is where we ended up, if I'm not mistaken. We were talking about communication techniques. And then chapter 6 moves into instructional techniques. Let me mark him here. We'll do some of that. Now, so let me share my screen. And I'm just going to leave it like this because I've seen on some of the videos, I don't know if any of you have missed and watched, I think when I change it to the slideshow now, it doesn't share, like it doesn't change with the slides as I'm changing. So I'm just talking and one slide is showing for them. So I'm going to go here and just scroll down from this, but this should be plenty big enough for you guys to see what we're doing. This chapter is all about, when you think about recreation therapy and what we have to provide to our people, you got to remember that a lot of times we may be teaching somebody something new that they don't know, that they've never done before, an activity. A lot of times that's going to be the case, especially if you're coming up with new and fresh ideas and researching and trying to find things that are, to keep it mixed up, then you're going to have a lot of different activities. And so there will be a lot of teaching. So when we're talking about instructional techniques here, it's not about me standing up here in front of you guys telling you how to do it. This is about how do we instruct our clients that we are providing recreation therapy to. That's what this chapter is all about. So we'll talk about the 4 steps to student or client, the person that you're working with or the group you're working with, to their learning. There's 4 steps to teaching, 3 factors that can hinder learning that we need to stay away from. 4 principles of learning. We'll identify some different learning styles. And I see that in students every class. And, some people are visual learners. Some people are auditory learners. Some people need to write every single thing down. Some people need to not write anything down and actually pay attention to what's being said. It's just everybody learns a little different, and that's something that we'll see as we go through this. We'll talk about a behavioral objective, components of learning, taxonomies, and identify instructional techniques. So there's 4 steps to student learning. And think about the different groups that we work with. Who all do we work with in recreation therapy? What sorts of individuals do we work with? As far as who we are providing the services to, like who are we going to be serving? Elderly, special needs, absolutely. Children in some settings, people with, when we say elderly, we may be talking about people with dementia, could be correctional facilities, could be people with spinal injuries, a lot of different people with traumatic brain injuries, so they can't, their learning curve is a little different than yours and mine because they've got damage there. So we have to remember things like that. But receiving information is the first step to them learning. We give it out, they have to receive it, and we need to give it in a way that they can comprehend what we're saying. We want to, that's why I try to talk to you guys just in real terms without a whole bunch of big words and all this good stuff, because number one, that's not really how I talk. Number two, you want to make it where people can remember what you're saying and make it not where they're sitting there thinking, okay, what does that word mean? And they don't get the rest of the message. So you don't want to do that. They need to be able to receive your information. Once they get it, the information has to be processed by the individual. Now, when I tell you guys instructions of how to play a game or how to do an activity, y'all are going to be able to do it most likely. If you're awake and if you're looking at me when I'm going over it, y'all would need one time, I would think, and everybody'd be able to jump right in and follow along. Now, if I was at the NMRC working with individuals with developmental disabilities, what are we going to have there? What's their processing time going to be in regards to, in relation to what yours would be? Much longer in a lot of cases, depending on how affected they are. So we need to realize that the processing time takes a lot. It takes a little longer for it to sink in, maybe. So give them time to process what you're saying and even opportunities to ask for clarification and things like that. It says here it depends on the quality and quantity of competing information. They need to know that that's where we talked about, building rapport with your patients, getting them to trust you, building a good working relationship where they see what you're saying as being of quality and something that they actually want to learn. Once they have gotten this, and when it says competing information, when you're teaching, okay, how many of y'all heard that ding right then? Okay, if it was happening like every 5 seconds, would it distract you? That would be something that's competing against you trying to teach. So you need to try to get away from circumstances that are obviously going to interfere with people being able to concentrate on what you're telling them. You're trying to teach them a new skill, you're trying to teach them rules, you're trying to teach them things like that. And they need to be able to focus on you. They don't need to be focusing on the elevator dinging, constantly, or a door slamming, or people out in the hall, playing water guns. Do you think they're going to listen to you if there's a group out in the hall shooting each other with water guns and squirting? No. I say that because I've actually had that situation before at work. So once they have processed what you told them, they're going to evaluate it for meaning, worth, and association with other memories. If you can ever tie in what you're talking about with them and get them to bring it into how it relates to their life, then they're going to grab a hold to it a little more, if they associate it with another memory or something that they've done before. And worth, what we're saying here, they need to take what you're saying as being what you're trying to teach them as being worth their effort to process, learn, and follow. And that's where that good relationship that you can form with your patients comes into play. They believe in you. They're going to see what you're saying as having worth. And then at that point, it's going to be encoded or stored, basically. Got it. That's basically, you know, they can say, I got it. Again, very different depending on who you're working with. You know, the elderly, if you're dealing with some sort of complex, you know, if you're talking about electronics or something, you're probably going to have to go over it more than once with a group of elderly patients. Just saying. If you're dealing with developmental disabilities, you're going to have to give instructions more than once, and you have to work on patients as a practitioner because you can't expect them to get it the first time. It's not their fault, and that's something that you have to remember. So this encoding and storing a lot of time comes from repetition, and I think that we will talk more about that as we go through. Well, looky here, 4 steps to teaching. Y'all should be able to recognize these, and you see how they flow through everything we talk about in rec therapy almost. And you can see how they play into the teaching situation. You know, you have to assess what you are going to try to teach, make a plan of how you're going to do it, then you implement the teaching process, then evaluate whether the way you did it was effective or not. So that's just 4 steps to teaching, easy to remember, the same API that we've talked about before. 3 factors that hinder learning. 1 can be lack of readiness on the part of the learner if they're not interested, if they're not, you know, if you're not feeling good. Does that affect how much you're willing to buy into what's going on a given day? Absolutely. If you've got something going on at home that nobody else knows about, you know, but it's eating you up and that's all you can think about, is that going to play into things? Absolutely. That can hinder the learning process. And sometimes we won't understand why someone isn't getting it, you know, and it may be something like that I'm talking about. Another thing that can hinder learning is if the instructor isn't prepared. If you come in there and just say, oh, I'm just going to wing it, and then you get up there and you're taking too long and you're losing your place on your notes that you're trying to read to them, or you haven't made any notes. If you're not prepared and you don't feel confident enough to stand up there and lead and teach, then that's going to hinder the learning process. And then an unencouraging environment. Either where, okay, I've talked before about the drug and alcohol rehabilitation facilities. There are some, they kind of come and go in groups. Everybody's on kind of different schedules. But when I would come in, I was doing some consulting there, and there were some times that I would come in and they would have the best groups. They were all engaged. They were all wanting to learn. They were all paying attention. You didn't. And then there were other times that, you know, you may have 12 individuals in a group that they were trying to do an activity for, and you had 6 of them that were doing everything they could to just disrupt what was going on. Hard. That was an unencouraging environment. When you said they're just trying to drag it down. Also, that would be a situation like where you had, okay, what if it was freezing cold in this room right now? Some of y'all might be cold now, I don't know. But if you are super hot, super cold, does that play into you paying attention? Yep. If there were, let's say you were outside and there were ant beds. You know, you're out in like a grassy field and people are getting bit by ants while you're trying to teach. Is that going to be effective? Nope. I mean, that's an unencouraging environment. Not only are they getting distracted, they're constantly looking for that. They're not listening to you. And then a few of them get bit and it's just over with at that point. So I'm just saying, those are kind of things that would play into an unencouraging environment. 4 principles of learning: preparation, structure, and organization is the first. The next one is something that we've talked about. We talked about it in 262. This is something that we want to reach. It's a state of optimal arousal and focus, which just means that you have their full attention. That those things that are maybe going on at home, they can forget about for a little bit because you've got them tuned in. You've got them there. And that's where you want them. And when someone is in that state, what do we call that state? Do you guys remember the term flow? That's where you want to get your patients, your clients to when you are doing activities with them. And sometimes, you know, when I say this, sometimes our activities are of a teaching nature. You know, it may be a situation where we're talking about healthy lifestyle changes that they could make. That's a good recreation therapy activity. You're helping to improve their well-being, you know. So it's a teaching environment, yet you're still providing recreation therapy, if you see what I'm saying. There might not be doing a recreation. You want to have some fun in it. You want to break it up, maybe do some activities to make it recreation therapy where they're actually doing something during that. You just don't want to stand up in front and talk to a group, especially because most of the people that we're talking to have some sort of special needs of some sort. So you want to break it up. You want to do some activities if you can, things like that. But some of the things that we do are teaching when we are doing our activities. Readiness and prioritization, and that needs to be on both ends, not just the people that we are trying to teach, but it needs to be from us also. We need to be ready on our end to be, you know, by showing that we're prepared, that we know what we're talking about, that what we are talking to them about is going to help them. And that will help them to prioritize what we're giving them as something that they need to try to take in. And then what you really want is active engagement and participation. There are some cases where you know, you'll have someone just absolutely deny you of that. And you can't go put your hands on them and make them do it. But most of the time, you know, it's that peer pressure thing. If everybody's doing it, even the other patients or clients will say, oh, come on. You know, if somebody's trying to be shy or doesn't want to do it, they'll get them to do it with your help. So you want to get to active engagement and participation. That's once they've gotten through preparation. This is a continuum. Think of it that way, as looking at it from top to bottom. They're preparing. They see the structure of what's going on. They organize it in their mind. Then they're going to really zone in to get what you're giving them. Then they actually have to be in a state of readiness, like, okay, I'm buying into this. And then you go to active participation and engagement. So think of it as a continuum from top to bottom. It begins at the top and goes down. So when we're talking about teaching and we're talking about preparation, structure, and organization, structure it's important. Things don't have to be, when I say structure, you don't have to do it like an outline. It doesn't have to be something that you can't tweak as you go along, but you need to have some sort of plan in place that you're following when you're teaching something, period. That's why I like to have these guys up here, because it gives me, you know, something that I can elaborate on when I'm talking to you guys. But it keeps me on track and keeps me from getting, you know, talking about cows and whatever else I might want to talk about that day. Just saying, it keeps me on track. Open communication, pleasant conditions, and consequences. We talked about how, you know, you want to have an area, a learning environment that is not going to hinder what you're wanting to do. And that's basically what this is kind of alluding to here. You also want to always, if you want your patients to really buy into what you're doing, to feel like they're a part, which obviously if they're participating, they're a part of their program, but as a part of planning, a part of the full process, then you need to make sure that you give them the opportunity to give you feedback periodically. Now, does that mean that you have to sit down at the end of every session and ask them what they thought, one-on-one with every person, or do a survey after each session? Heck no. But, you know, it can be just in passing in the hall. Hey, John, what you think about what we did yesterday? You enjoy that? Real, you know, just laid back, you're getting feedback. You know, find some ones that are going to be honest with you and say, hey, you know, I really like that. Well, what would you change? And you can get some valuable information by talking to them. And it doesn't have to be a, hey, come to my office, let's sit down and talk about what we've been doing. Now, you can do that, but it doesn't have to be. It can be laid back. So let's talk about the structure a little bit. When you're teaching something, you need to provide a clear context and rationale or your reason for the program or for what you're teaching them. Then they're going to see the benefits. Then they're going to say, okay, this is why I'm here. This is what he's doing for me or she's doing for me. Explain how it fits into the context of their total treatment plan program. That, you know, you want them to understand, hey, we're not just doing this for no reason. You know, we talked about how we were going to try to improve your cardiovascular health. Well, by doing this is going to help tie into that. You know, by learning this, you'll understand more about how this is going to help. You know, just kind of tie it together for them. Outline the steps or activities that will be taken. You know, you don't want to surprise your folks too much. I mean, good surprises, yeah. I mean, if you have a surprise party for somebody, yeah, absolutely. But you want them to kind of know what's coming, because a lot of people, all right, who likes surprises? Who doesn't? Look, it's pretty much about half and half. You see what I'm saying? Like, so what we need to do is people want to know what's coming up, you know, so you want to give them. That's why, like, when it comes time for our test, I'm going to give y'all plenty of time to know when it's happening. You know, I don't want to spring it on you. Hey, surprise, it's tomorrow. You know, I'm not going to do that to you. I'll keep you updated along the way by outlining the steps. You know, we're going to finish this chapter on Thursday, then we're going to have the test on Tuesday, or, you know, whatever. Don't write that down. I'm not saying that's the case. Define basic terms, especially in cases of people who have low recreation or low health literacy. We've talked about that a little bit. If you're going to be using terms that you think that your patient may not understand, even though you are, you know, trying to keep it as simple as possible, sometimes we have to define basic terms that you're going to be using. Now, when I say this, what I'm talking about is this, and you may have to break it down into an action or something that they can see where they can understand. You want to provide specific, concise guidelines for each new learning task. That's important. Specific, concise. Those are two words that say a lot in 2 words if you think about it. You don't give a lot of leeway when you make it specific. And concise, you're not putting a bunch of extra fluff in there that is just going to confuse the people that you're talking to. So keep it specific and concise. You want to create opportunities for the students to rehearse performance evaluation tasks. You want to make sure that, you know, if you're going to test them on how many, if you're going to test them on how many sit-ups they can do in a certain amount of time, some people are competitive, not just with the group, with themselves. They want to do the best they can. You don't want to just walk in Now you can say, you could come in and get a baseline number one day, have people do like some physical activities and see where they are. And then you say, all right, in 3 weeks, we're going to come back in here and we're going to do this same thing again. And that will give them an opportunity to rehearse, you know, what you're doing. Now, if that's not a teaching scenario, but that's an example of how you would give them an opportunity to be able to practice or work on what you're going to ask them to do down the road. Try to use specific examples from clients' lived experiences. Again, that's just tying in what you're doing to things that they can relate with, and that helps them to understand what you're talking about, and it helps to keep them focused, because now they're tying it in with something that has to do with a memory of theirs, something that they have already lived before. If they tie those two things together, they're going to gather more of the information that you give them. Use prompts as necessary to keep activity progressing. Remember, the two most important, what do you think my two most important words on that line are? Absolutely, as necessary. Do you want to be just sitting there barking at them the whole time? Nope, I don't like that. They probably won't either. If you see something is just going terribly wrong and they're not figuring out, you may have to step in a nice manner, even if it's pulling somebody to the side and say, hey, what you need to be doing, you know, make sure to keep activity progressing on the line that you want it to go on by giving prompts as necessary. Now you can cheer along or something if somebody's doing great. Hey, good job. If any of y'all are wondering, y'all can look at this group right over here, see what they're doing, something like that. You're bragging on them. You're not pointing the finger at this group and saying, hey, y'all suck. You got to get better. You know, you're not doing that. You're giving them an opportunity to watch another group. If you've got them broken into groups and one is killing it, they can take a minute to learn from that. They're getting that visual learning from their peers. It's all a good thing. And you're just using a prompt to kind of get them on the right track again. Allow time for repetition and practice if needed until the task is clear and is accomplished. Again, like I said, this is going to vary drastically depending on who you're working with. With the developmental disability group, repetition, 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 repetition. If you really want somebody to learn it. That's just the way it goes. Eventually, it will become clear and accomplished. Open communication is something that you want to always have when you're teaching. You know, if I haven't said it before, if I'm talking and you guys have a question, you know, you've all heard this before. If you have a question while I'm talking, just raise your hand or just yell out. I'll be glad to make sure that your people know that too. You know, that, hey, questions are welcome. Let's talk about it if you have any issues, questions. Portray enthusiasm for subject matter and model appropriate behavior. You set the tone. As the leader, you're going to set the tone in a lot of ways for the activity. Now, you may have some spectacular clients that kind of help set the tone as well, that get super excited and make everybody laugh and things like that. But you are the one that is going to set the tone and say, hey, this is important stuff. This is going to help you. We're going to have fun with this. You know, we'll talk about how it's going to tie into your life. So let's just jump into it. You know, and if you've got a smile on your face and you show some enthusiasm, it goes a long way with the people you're talking Inform your students of the objectives for each session. What would that equate to in the recreation therapy process of guiding an activity? Briefing. Yep, that would be like the briefing session. You're telling them a lot of times the objectives. At the very least, you're telling them, well, no, in a teaching situation like we're talking about here, you need to tell them the objectives. You need to tell them why we're doing this. We're learning this so that you can play pickleball, so that you can, go on trips without having extra assistance, things like that. Tell students the reasons for his or her actions, what you expect from what you're teaching. Tell them why they need to do it, because it's not just my 2, 5, and 7-year-old kids that ask why. Adults do it too, I promise. Whoever you work with, and even if they're not asking why, they're probably wondering it. So remember that, to tell them the reason for their actions. Establish a safe environment for personal disclosure. Some people are comfortable yelling it out in front of the group. Some people want to talk to me after class. Some people want to come see me in my office. Some people want to do an email. Everybody's a little different in what their safe space for personal disclosure may be. Now, take the word personal and make it in, say that it's something that is of personal nature. They all need to know how they can find you, when is a good time to talk to you, things like that. The best way to go about getting your ear alone. So that's part of open communication. Encourage your participants to take risks and ask questions. We've already said that. Taking risks, step out of your comfort zone is basically all that amounts to. You're not asking them to go, try a tightrope for the first time. You're asking them to get out of their comfort zone. That is taking a risk to a lot of our people. Create pleasant physical conditions. Plays into what I was talking about, like the temperature being right, the lighting being proper, if you're trying to teach, things like that. Where if you're in a more pleasant environment, you're going to be able to focus more, you're going to listen more, you're going to gain more from it. We've gone over this a bunch. Set challenging but attainable tasks. That is super key, and that is a huge, huge part of creating that flow that we talked about. Your tasks need to be challenging enough to gain all of their focus, yet you want them to be able to be successful as well. And that's, like I said, that's something that's kind of learned in a lot of ways. Give participants feedback as soon as possible. When are you going to do that a lot of times? You can give them some feedback during we talked about how we do briefing up front. You can give them some feedback during the debriefing. You can also talk to them individually if necessary, or, if they want to, things like that. Reward by recognition of participants' efforts. That doesn't mean you have to bake everybody a cake. That just means that if someone's doing a good job, you need to tell them they're doing a good job. And that goes a long way. I can tell you from being in the workforce at several different places. I've worked places where you never got a attaboy for anything. That gets very tiresome after a while. I don't live, I'm not saying I just thrive and live for praise or whatever, but man, every so often you need somebody to say, hey, I like the way that you're listening today. I like the way that you participated. Good job. And that's important, and it means more to most people than you even realize. This is kind of, we all know this. Avoid ridiculing or degrading participants in any way. That would be calling some particular person out during an activity or a teaching session, in a way that's going to embarrass them or calling them a name or something like that. We just don't do that. Establish a learning framework that includes mutual respect and consideration for others and their perspectives, while acknowledging the value of both critique and collaboration. Basically, that's you saying, hey, I think I'm right, but I'm willing to listen to you. If you have anything that you think can make this better, if y'all want to come up with some things that we can do, some ideas, collaboration, you want them to be able to tell you, sometimes you need to say, hey, like I said, what'd you think about today? Is there anything I could have done better? Some people weren't really into it. What do you think I could have done to get them to engage? Leave that there where they see that you value their perspective, and they're not going to be punished for giving you an honest critique of what you're doing as a leader. Feedback. Now, y'all have all this stuff on Blackboard that you can come back through and look at, like before test time. It'll be pretty easy. Hopefully, if you're remembering some of the stuff I'm saying, it'll come back to you as you go through the slides. Feedback. Prompts may be needed with new and complex tasks before being faded gradually as learning progresses. Y'all get what that's saying? As they're doing activities, you may have to be interjecting a little more right at first. Like I said, you don't want to be barking at them the whole time that something is going on. You're teaching them a new activity. Then they start to do it, and you've got several people doing it wrong. You need to go ahead and take care of that once you fix it a few times up front. And you can do it in a joking manner, in a way that's not going to hurt people's feelings. That's, again, as you give them prompts or corrections, they'll start getting better and better and better, and you'll have to give, and you will need to give fewer and fewer corrections. So that's where you can kind of fade out as the learning progresses. You'll see as they get better, you won't have to be prompting them along the way. Feedback needs to be directed toward behaviors as that relate to meeting the objectives of the session. So make your feedback relevant to what you're actually working on. Don't just delve off into something totally different that you're not talking about that day. Don't give them feedback from something 2 classes ago during the middle of a new activity. It needs to be constructive and move the learner towards improved learning. Immediate feedback provides feeling of satisfaction if the client is successful. That's a good, it's like I say, if you see somebody doing something great the first time, point that out. They get that feedback right off the bat. How are they going to work to do that again next time? Just because they got, recognized for doing well the first time. Even when correction is necessary, feedback can reduce tension because the learner then knows what's learned and what hasn't been mastered. Tension, self-tension. We're not talking about tension between me and the people that I'm leading. They're feeling tension. They're feeling nervous because they don't really know what they're doing yet. So if you give them some correction, they're like, okay, well, he didn't correct me on this part and this part and this part, so I'm doing that right. So they can kind of relax a little bit because you're giving them the guidance that they need to move on. Again, this principle of optimal arousal and focus, that is, again, what we're talking about, flow. And able to reach flow, there needs to be a sense of what you're doing has meaningfulness to the individual. It needs to have them engaged. A lot of times it helps when it's something new, novelty, something that they haven't really done before. You're going to be, if it's something you've done 1,000 times, are you going to be just super excited about it? And I mean, unless it's just like your favorite thing. Something new will get them to focus in because they're trying to learn because they don't already know it or think that they already know everything about it. And basically, you're not trying to control anybody. You just need to make sure that your learners are focusing on what's going on. That helps you to get to that flow state. Okay, meaningfulness. So we're breaking that down. Each one of these things that we're going through, you have the slide that has 2 or 3, and then we have a slide for each one. So it's breaking it down. This stuff is going to be easy to come back and review for you guys. You want to relate the subject matter to the clients as much as possible. Obviously, the more it relates to them, the more they're going to remember what you're talking about, the more they're going to buy into it. Explain the benefits in clear and personal terms. This is how it's going to affect you. Very straightforward. Communicate an expectation of success for everybody. Hey, that comes down to like when you're starting an activity, being optimistic and being engaging up front and saying, hey guys, we're going to do this today. We're going to get this done. We might stumble at first, but we're going to finish it. Okay. Giving them an optimistic front end is going to go a long way. Telling them that you expect them to success. Focus on the participants' past, present, or future experiences. That can happen during the debriefing state. After you finish up, a lot of times you will talk about things like, so what we learned today, how does this relate to things when you're at home? And, and it talks about things, hey, you played pickleball before, but have you ever played the way we did today? You're going to talk about things that they've done, focus on things and get them to engage and talk back with you. You want that back and forth going. Consider your students' interests, values, aspirations, and goals. So we talked about that up front when we were talking about the, assessment and planning phase. During assessment, you're finding out what their interests are. You find out what they like to do as far as recreation and leisure. You ask them for some input on some things that they would like to do or not to do. And that's where you're going to find out a lot of their interests and values and aspirations. And that's how you come up with, they have goals, and then you can write specific goals to help them reach their goals. And then relate to other treatment that's being received, even by other disciplines. This is going to also, physical therapy is working with you on your arm strength. Now, by doing this is going to play hand in hand with that, and this is going to help you as well. So if you can tie it into other treatment, that's always a good thing. Arousal, novelty, and diversity offer a number of materials and activities with a range of complexity to pique learner interest. Everybody has different things that are going to grab their attention. So basically, you just want to give some variety is what this is getting down to. Anchor each session in learners' goals and future activities as well as other treatment. So you want it to kind of cater what you're doing to what they are wanting to get out of it as well as much as you can. Sequence your activities within the session to build interest. You want to make it where they're going to become more and more interested the more they learn about what you're talking about. Consider that learners have different learning styles and preferences. We've talked about that. Use real life examples whenever possible. That goes a long way with learning, especially with certain groups that you're going to be working with. They really need those real life examples for them to even, to believe what you're telling them. Use a pleasant voice that expresses enthusiasm. That it really does matter. You know, if you're down and you are unenthusiastic, people are not going to stay awake even. I mean, use interesting stimuli with differing intensity and emotional arousal. Balance the appropriate amount of new learning, because too much can create anxiety, too little can create boredom. Again, that's that fine line that you kind of learn, that you have to get to know your patients and your clients to kind of learn what that is for everybody. Now, if you're teaching or, you know, working with a large group, that's going to be hard to do. Some cases you just can't do that. Small groups, it's easier to kind of reach that point. But if you just go on, it's like when I'm standing up here sometimes talking, I can see there's some days that I'll just quit. I'm like, okay, we're done. Y'all are done. So let's go. Like I see people's eyes just go gone. You know, some people come in that way, but some people, you know, they just reach that point. If you give them just too much, you'll see people switch off. They're done. Focus and learner control. What we were talking about here, you want to organize materials from simple to complex, from known to new, low risk to high risk. And we talked about how you want to have it ascending so they get more interested as you go along. If you think about that, that top one plays into that. If you organize from simple to complex, known to new, low risk to high risk, then it's gonna get their attention more, because you're going into new, more exciting things in the second portions there. Clear, concise directions, communicate expectations that each person will participate and take responsibility. And that's something that you do have to do as a recreation therapist. Sometimes you have to say, all right, guys, I can't do this myself. I can't make you better if you don't help me. You know, you're going to need to participate in what we're doing. You're going to have to give the effort that we're asking you to give if you want to get the benefits that you need. Even if it's just, you know, that may be just showing up for someone that doesn't want to come, you know, to the activities. It may be that, you know, hey, look, you've got to at least come to the sessions. You have to give that kind of tough love sometimes, because sometimes they just need it. Ask participants to set personal goals for the session. Now, for that to be the case, your briefing stage would have to be in depth enough for them to know what's going on, for them to be able to tell you what their goals are going to be. If they don't know enough about what you're going to do, how are they going to do that? So sometimes that you won't be able to do that. But when you can, let them set goals, especially if it's something where, you know, just say it was a physical challenge. You know, how many do you think you can do in a minute? You know, make them set a goal, and then they'll push what they're going to try to do. Relate each section of the session with the other sections. Just tell them how everything ties together. Use materials that help them focus. Sometimes that might be flip charts, whiteboard, posters, PowerPoints, videos, you up there doing a dance, whatever it takes. Different people need different things to help them focus. Allow your learners to have some control or choice over their materials and their participation. Again, they're going to have that. You can't force people to do anything in our settings. but you can motivate them, and you can push them to participate and to engage. And that's your role, and that's what's expected. Use repetition to enhance retention. We've talked about that. Ask questions about the material being learned. I do that to you guys like just a little while ago when I asked, okay, what happens before we start? And we're given instructions, and somebody said briefing. You know, that's just checking retention by, asking about material that's been learned. When you're teaching them, every so often ask them, okay, now when did I say you start? Or, where's the out of bounds on the court here? Is it the red line or the yellow line? Do you guys remember? We talked about it, and then somebody else will say it. So now they've heard it from you. They've heard it from someone else. They know that one of their peers knows it. So, I should know this too. They're going to kind of buy into it, and grab it a little bit more if they have that. So you ask questions to make sure that they're understanding and following along with what you're doing. Allow enough time for new information to be synthesized by each participant. As I said, it matters if you're dealing with someone with dementia, if you're dealing with someone with mental retardation, developmental disabilities, somebody with a brain injury. Obviously, you're going to have slower time to synthesize new information. It's going to take them longer to process. And it truly is like that. I mean, it's like you think about a computer, you get a new one, and it's fast. Then as you age or as you have something that happens to it, the hard drive goes out, and then it's not going to move quite as, everything slows down. And what's happening is it's synthesizing things just like people do. Their hard drive isn't working as well as others, and it takes longer for things to synthesize. All right, I'm going to make a mark right here. I've got a video that I wanted to show you guys. What's the date today, guys? 23rd. Thank you. I'll make a note there. So I'm going to stop share here. And the volume in this room, I can't ever really figure out how to get it to come out right, but I think it will be enough. We'll watch this video, maybe not the whole thing, but a good part of it. It shows how they're leading a group of dementia patients with dance. And even the instructors talk about it, the first part of it. I didn't really know what to expect, or I didn't expect it to go this well. The best feeling ever is when you kind of have that feeling and then it works out even better than you anticipated. So just something to think about. Let me share this screen through here again. You guys hear it at all? Let me see if I can get to the...
speed for a kid, aren't you? Anything that can be done to help people stay healthily.
Since the first part couldn't hear. This is obviously not in America.
Working with older people, particularly people with dementia, is a growing area of work in Britain these days because there's a recognition that as people live longer, there are larger numbers of people living with dementia. Right, let's just think about how we might need to translate that. We might need to do it at half the speed. So let's just try and have half the speed for a kid, can't we? Anything that can be done to help people stay healthily active.
That's an activity modification right there
and
to help
prevent
them to be able to get what they're doing.
Which again are, apart from being devastating for the individual involved, costing the health service a huge amount of money. So yes, this is definitely a growing area of work.
We all need to just have a little look and checking all the boxes.
We went on this 2-day course, Dementia Danzig, which the first Friday life I got from me. My left feet have got my feet in ceremony, but I was quite surprised when we got into it. And since we've finished the course, we've started this session of our own. It's amazing. I was absolutely amazed the first time I did it. I've never done anything like this, and I thought, you know, well, the reaction was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I thought, well, I've done something right, which was very pleasing.
In particular, for people with dementia who have difficulty with memory, particularly with short-term memory, then making sure that whatever dance we're engaging, it doesn't rely on remembering instructions or steps or any particular thing. It's just doing what they want to do. So if I can actually set up the conditions where they can just move, perhaps respond to some music or to some stimulus, and just enjoy being in the moment and just, if you like, being quite playful with movement.
I tend to have a repetitive music on, but I find that people that have got dementia work better with this. To us, it's essential that they do these movements, keep the body active and the mind, makes them think, you see, this is the point.
We bring my mum on a regular basis every week, and it's really good that she has the opportunity to meet other people with similar problems of confusion and dementia, and actually using the limbs is useful, and paying attention to other people. There's a degree of concentration involved, of course, and although they're doing things in fun, they're actually using muscles and limbs that they probably wouldn't do sat in a home environment just watching television or something like that. You don't realise that you're doing the exercises.
My husband's in a care home, he has dementia, and it helps a lot because everybody's in the same position and we all help one another. And like I say, it's a good life at which laughter's the best medicine anyway. That's it.
There's a very important physical side to it. So I've got physical outcomes in mind. So I'm looking at maintaining flexibility, mobility, muscle strength, and so on. There's the social interaction, because they're actually having some pleasurable contact with other people. And I'm also thinking about having fun, engendering a situation where there's some playfulness, where people don't have to worry about getting it wrong.
Yeah, that one's working your brain and
I've
your
come
body.
here today as a voluntary worker and I do chair-based exercises. They come in by ring and ride and they range from about 70-odd-year-olds to, well, the eldest is 90. And they come to do a bit of exercise and then they have lunch, play bingo or a quiz. And so it's a social occasion.
Well, I don't work a lot, and coming down here, I've got friends. Well, otherwise I'd be alone doing nothing, just sat in the chair, you know, like a couch potato, really.
Are we ready? Yeah. Go!
I didn't want to come here at first, it was full of when she said she wanted to go somewhere. Then I came here and from the first moment, the staff, everybody's absolutely brilliant. And we always have a nice lunch, a little chat, bingo, and we go home happy.
After you've been here for exercise, you can tell who you've been, because you can tell them by your legs. It's the legs that you need to keep going when you get older, because without them you can't get nowhere.
Try to make it fun more than just coming and sitting down and twiddling your fingers or, you know, just moving your feet. It's more about having a laugh and trying to get everybody involved, and hopefully they're enjoying it.
Stepping it up now. Literally.
Well, training like this gives dance practitioners another string to their bow. It's something else that they can offer and hopefully get paid work from, because there is paid work out there for encouraging people living with dementia to take part in more physical activity.
Yeah, I had to do it all for long. If you just come in and you do this kind of thing, so I'm going to bring you a pile of roses. I'm sorry to do the same activity.
I sometimes joke about Joyce Grenfell, who is deliciously funny, but it's a caricature which unfortunately is sometimes alive and well in care homes in Britain today. And it's this bossy, don't do that, come on, you can get your arms higher than that, George, and this kind of approach. So we can think of the opposite to that. To sum up, it's to be less verbal and to try leading from behind occasionally and taking the cue from the person that we're working with.
This is an elderly residential home for people with dementia. It's called Wilfred Gear and it's in Falmouth and it's run by Bolton Council. Like before, we didn't really know what we were doing.
Okay, I liked, she said leading from behind right there at the end. I like that in that situation, because you're not setting a wrong and right for that. You want them to, so what all kind of, what benefits were they looking for out of that activity? Mobility. And they didn't even know they were doing it. You know, they weren't thinking about working on mobility. What else? social aspect was huge. You think a lot of those people maybe feel depressed? See how many smiles were on that video? I mean, I'll be blatantly honest with you. I can't see myself running a dance thing like that. That's just not my thing. But I thought it was really good for the group that they were working with. And the thing about it is, if I was working there, even though it's not really my thing, I would do it. Do I have to be embarrassed about a group of dementia patients? No, absolutely not. Something else I saw that was good in this video, and you won't have this a lot of times, but you could tell that a lot of the people had support system. They had people there with them that they were comfortable with. You could tell it was like their daughters and family members that were right in there intermixed. And I think that helps, and that helped to bring a lot of those smiles. So if you're in a situation where you can bring family in, that's a good thing. You know, it brings that familiarity that makes them feel comfortable. One other thing that I noticed on it, there was one portion where they were doing I think it was the head, shoulders, knees, and toes, and there was one lady in the blue shirt. She was losing bad. She was just sitting there. But you know what they weren't doing? They weren't pointing her out. They weren't calling her out for not doing it. It all works, you know. I think it was a good video. It shows how they got them active, and it kind of shows how, you know, when people have asked me before about recreation therapy, you know, when I was working, they said, well, what do you do exactly? And I'm like, well, I trick people into getting better every day. And it sounds kind of mean if you put it that way, but it's not. You know, you get them to do things that they like to do, get involved and kind of reach that area kind of like flow where they're just in and they're doing, and before you know it, they're working on things and they don't even realize it. And that's another thing that I'll leave you with on recreation therapy and our activities. Physical therapy, and I'm not, physical therapy is awesome. I've been to physical therapy a bunch of times. I've needed it a lot of times. They know what they're doing. They're good, but they work on primarily physical ailments. The thing that I like about that is they were doing one activity, and we saw cognitive skills being worked on. We saw socialization. We saw people's mood being improved. And we saw people working on keeping mobility, doing some things that they would be working on perhaps with the physical therapist. So we're able to, in recreation therapy, touch on so many different aspects. And that's the thing that sets us apart from some of the other therapies that I really like. Any thoughts about that at all? Can anybody here see yourself running that? Ann? No. No? You're not going to go back to the VA and get them up with streamers?
Not like that.
Anyway, what we're going to do, we're going to jump back in. We got a little behind, obviously, with this time frame, and we're just going to go with the flow because we can't help that. We're going to finish the rest of this chapter, and hopefully chapter 7, because it's kind of short, very short as far as the PowerPoints. We're going to finish this chapter and chapter 7 Thursday. Probably come back. I really would like to have the test on next Tuesday, hopefully, depending on if that goes to plan. I'll let you know for sure on Thursday, and we'll go from there. I will also, if we're not going to have a review day in between, you know, like say if we might do it the next Thursday and have a review day maybe on Tuesday. If we're not going to do that, I'll try to give you like a study guide or something like that to help you. But it's going to be these chapters 1 through 7. If I recall, I'll check it all out and I will let you know for sure on Thursday, but be ready to finish this chapter and do chapter 7 when you come back next time. Welcome back. You guys have a good rest of your day. Thank you guys. See you next time.